This is Codex Machina, a podcast about reading, publishing, and all things books. We are your hosts, Bethany,
Natalia,
and Laura.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Strangeland Book Club. Today, we're going to be talking about the book Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, by Judy Blume. Please note accordingly that there will be some trigger warnings for discussion of female puberty and menstruation. If you haven't read the book, sorry, you will not get that joke. Why are we talking about this book today?
Well, I feel like we are in our censorship and book banning era. Unfortunately, are
we as a society or we as this podcast? Both. We will both.
I think both. And I think books that are dangerous or considered dangerous, as this one kind of is, well, I guess it actually is, but to me, yeah, that seems ridiculous. So I'm going to say it kind of is, but yeah, I think we're into books that make waves.
And today it is oldie but goldie, right? So we're talking about a book that has been banned for quite a while now, but at the same time has been read, which has
by many people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This book came out in, was it 1970?
1970, yeah. And I think Judy Blume has even said that at her own kids' school, it was banned initially.
They wouldn't stock it in the school library, I think.
Something like that. So, yeah.
It's insulting.
Right.
And so when I came to the recording today to our studio, so to say our improvised studio, I was a bit late and you guys were discussing some stunning book reviews from Goodreads. Don't we all like a 1-star book review from Goodreads? What was it saying?
Well, here's the thing. I feel like a lot of people on Goodreads, or let's call it the culture of reviewing on Goodreads, is very, very focused on personal experience and far less focused on the actual quality or themes of the book in a certain way. And I don't mean that necessarily to be insulting, even though I kind of do. But just the priority when people make Goodreads reviews is how did I feel about this without a really in-depth thought process into why they feel this way, if that makes sense. Laura, you had a couple of reviews that were absolutely driving you crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the thing is when people say, oh, this absolutely wasn't my experience, and what kind of dribble is this? And, and I think one thing they forget is they're reading a book that's told from the voice, the inner voice of an 11-year-old girl, for one. And I mean, I don't know, maybe some people grow up and they forget what their 11-year-old voice was, but I sure haven't. And I'm pretty old, so to me, it's kind of amazing. But, of course, not everybody's experiences are the same. And not everybody has the support when they're talking about what their puberty was like, what it was like to go through these changes. Some people may not have had parents that were like educating you about it and telling you it's okay and that this is part of life. So people may be particularly offended by this book because it's an experience of a girl in a loving family who's going through these changes. She's, yes, fairly privileged, but these are the things that go on in girls' heads.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. I remember being this age as well. I did have a supportive and loving family. This still wasn't my experience. Like, this wasn't something that I wanted to have happen to my body. But that's my critique about, like, this idea of reviewing a book only based on whether you think it's hashtag relatable. Because whether or not your experience matches up with Margaret's, or whether you, like, okay, here's the review that made me the most upset, is a guy gave it 2 stars. He's like, well, I'm sure this is absolutely scintillating for 12-year-old girls, but I'm a 25-year-old man. And I'm like, I don't see what that has to do with your review of the book.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Did you like the book? No. Okay, why did you read it if you knew it was about 11-year-old girls going through puberty?
Right.
Like, why is, your only critique whether or not you can relate to it? Because the book has, some themes, some narrative, like there's things going on besides just the actual concept of menstruation, right? It's standing in for things in this girl's life. And I'm like, can we not talk about how the book effectively used menstruation as a metaphor, right? Like, why does it have to be like, oh, well, that's not how I felt? I'm like, okay, I don't care.
Right.
Was the book good?
Right.
This is not, if it's not something you have experienced yourself, did it do the work in actually relaying you a story of someone else? Like, did you feel for that person? What have you learned from it, right? I feel like that's something we would normally go for.
I think more, and I guess this is as a perspective of someone who read it when they were 11 years old, back in the time when it was still a recognizable experience for some young girls in America. I mean, I realize not everybody had the luxury to have these kinds of problems in their life. But it is, I think the reviews also kind of point to the shifting reality of what it is to be 11 now and how that's different, and how maybe some of the pressures of being older might be more forced on kids at a younger age. And no, they don't want to reach these milestones of getting their period or growing breasts or whatever, that it's a different time. So I can understand that there's a criticism in what childhood might have been in 1970 versus what childhood is right now. And I can see how someone might say, well, I don't feel like this book can speak to young women today. I feel like it can, from the aspect of all these issues that I think are what make it bannable, from talking about menstruation, from talking about sexuality, religion, these kinds of things. It does it in a very relatable manner, in which you see the mind of the kid and how it's trying to navigate all these issues of adulthood at 11 years old, because there you are on the precipice of becoming an adult. And she's someone who, her parents are Jewish and Christian, but they raised her as nothing because of the family drama. And so she doesn't have her religion. She's looking into that the whole time. I think these questions are important. These are what kids should be thinking about when they're young. What does religion mean to me? Is it important for me to choose? Am I Jewish? Am I Christian? Things like, oh, I want to tell my mom I want a bra, but I'm nervous to do that. How do I do that? And to me, this is a real connection to being a young girl that I think people can relate to. There's something that you're worried to tell your mom, whether it's about buying a bra or something else. I think we all share this experience.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is, these are the specific markers that are called out in this book. Judy Blume was talking about menstruation, was talking about bras, was talking about religion. But yeah, the experience is just that of someone trying to understand what it will mean to be an adult and needing to navigate what she sees as normalcy. She wants to be normal. She doesn't want to be a weird kid. So she thinks, oh, everyone I know is a religion. Why am I not a religion? Oh, everyone I know is growing boobs. I need to have boobs now. Like, it's not about wanting boobs in and of themselves. She just wants to be normal. And you see that very, very much with the girl that they bully. I think her name was Laura, maybe? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine.
you see what happens to this girl who did get all of these markers a little early. Everyone hates her.
Right.
You know, everyone is like suspecting that their teacher is like into this girl. And I mean, like under the surface, you can see that's just absolutely not what's going on. It's just that these girls are only have one way of conceptualizing what it means to have gone through puberty already, and it makes you an adult. And that means, like, you know, you should be having sexual experiences. So, of course, they're like thinking about these things in relation to their classmate that just aren't true and that she's very hurt by.
Right.
You know, like, I just find it fascinating to think, like, you know, you scratch one single layer beneath the surface of what Margaret says and something else completely starts to appear. And the people who are giving it these really weird negative reviews, who are doing these book bans, don't seem to be capable of making that very light little scratch to look at what's actually being said, you know?
Right.
And that's what really pisses me off, is this kind of, obviously censorship is always kind of anti-intellectual, but this is so anti-intellectual to me. I'm like, it's a middle grade book. It's for 11-year-old girls. It is not hard to pick apart, you know, on purpose.
Right.
Like, you should be able to do that.
Right.
Anyway.
And yet, someone found this inappropriate.
Well, lots of people have, apparently, because, and I think, you know, very recently there's been more and more legislation that's trying to say we don't discuss menstruation in school until X grade. So I think 6th grade is one I've seen. I don't know. Hopefully there's not any older than that. But
It's possible.
yeah, the thing is, you know, with our changing times, young women get their periods earlier and earlier. And I guess we're shifting, at least in the US, to wanting people to have more babies, but I can't imagine you want 11-year-olds having babies. And I feel like, again, they've proved it over and over that education is the best way to prevent teen pregnancy, young pregnancy. And
Well, it's not even about the pregnancy necessarily at this stage. It's just like an 11-year-old girl should have the ability to know what's going on with her body, right? They don't want it discussed in school. That's stupid, okay? Because we already know that not every parent is capable or willing of having that conversation with their child at home. So somebody should be having that conversation with the child. But okay, let's say they need to have it at home and not at school. This book by Judy Blume is a great way to get that conversation going and help a girl work through emotionally what's, you know, happening to her or about to happen to her. And like banning this book, banning discussion of it in school doesn't stop girls from menstruating. So why are we preventing them from being able to talk about it? It makes no sense.
That's again the question of access to the information, right? Like that information that is about your health, if not physically too much, you know, like not every advice you see in the book is always applicable to everyone, but at least mentally and morally, like to know what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like this book, you know, basically just normalizes that this is a thing that's going to happen to you, that it happens to all girls, that it's fine, that you're going to be okay, that society is geared to help you with that. Like, I think those are great things for a girl to know when she's worried about this, right?
Right. And I think, you know, to me, I feel like it would be a great book for mothers and daughters to read together, or even both parents read with the daughter and talk about if they feel comfortable, or to have groups of young women in school read it together and talk about it. And, you know, not as these themes specifically, because again, as we've already pointed out, people have different experiences when they're going through this. But the point is, they have experiences that they don't understand, that they're trying to make sense of. They're getting a whole lot of hormones and crazy thoughts coming in, and it helps to understand other people go through these different things. And I understand I'm being normal in this,
Yeah.
and I've got support somewhere. And for me, I was very fortunate to grow up in a time in the 70s where moms were, let's find out how to educate our girls. Let's talk to them about things. I had a mother who would read these books and she'd let me freely talk to her about these things. So, she would give me books about sex and this and that. And so,
I mean, that's the thing is like you need to know what sex is and how to have it and not have it before you have it, right? I do want to say one thing just right in the middle here because it's important to me. We're using a lot of really gendered language just because the book kind of lends itself to that because it's normal. But there are definitely people who menstruate who are not girls. So let's make sure we've said that. And let's also think about, things like there could be a child who's about to go through menstruation who has parents that don't.
Right.
And don't know how to talk about that in their head, right? So there's lots of situations beyond just the really standard one where this can be an effective tool for communication,
Right.
I think.
And I think that's another place where, it used to be normal to think that this is where schools come in. When parents don't have the tools or the ability to have these discussions with their kids, then the schools educate them on this. Then again, if we're headed to a society, at least in the United States, where you want more children and you don't want women to be educated about their bodies or what happens, okay, we're crossing into a certain type of fascism that I think it's a little scary. But
yeah, there are only so many reasons why you wouldn't want a person to be educated about their own body and sexuality.
Right.
And none of them are very good.
no. And I mean, I especially think when you're talking, we're, in 2025, and we're trying to kind of go back to something before, the 60s or 70s when women really didn't have roles in life that were the same as what we ended up with, the freedom of expression and having their own credit card and buying property and these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate back to Bethany, what you were saying, again, books is such a, written books normally, right? Is such a great way to, first of all, be a sort of like explanation to what's happening to, let's say, people in the standard case. But at the same time, if it's a book about a less usual case, for example, someone who is supposed to go through menstruation, but it doesn't happen for years and years, for example, that's also, again, a case, an exception, sure, but there is a possibility, right? There are women who do not menstruate. And having books about that as well can benefit both those who are going through this and can't talk about that openly for whatever reason, and those who have a more standard situation, but it would allow them to see not everyone is the same.
Right.
Not everyone has the same experience I have. So maybe that would also develop a little bit more empathy and just awareness of the fact that this is not the only way to have it develop. And that could be applied basically to anything in life, really, but also just to reiterate back to having these books could be such a helpful way for people to navigate life when they can't really get help from the caregivers, for example, or from school or from a medical professional and so on. So yeah. But speaking of that, how to get this information, less about the content, more about the publication itself. I think we were all a little bit surprised at the packaging of this book in one of its latest iterations. And going back to what we were talking about in the beginning, how this is a book for younger readers, right? So, and the copy we have now in front of us is from 2022.
Yeah.
And it is very simple cover. It's bright pink, and it features those speech bubbles from a chat, mimicking a chat, right? Where Margaret is writing, "I there, God, it's me, Margaret," and then ... to say that I guess the God is writing back. So I could see why they were thinking, okay, we have to adapt the cover to appeal to younger audience today. I feel like to me that will be very misleading because I'm like, I thought the book was from 1970s. I'm like, what chat were they using?
Yeah, well, okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's fine to change the cover once in a while. I did read, I read the original, but from what I understand, there's been a couple of updates in subsequent editions where they actually update the language around menstrual products to make sure it accurately reflects the types of products that girls will actually find in the store right now, as opposed to like the belt situation that they were having in the 70s. And I thought, oh, that actually is really interesting. Like, because this is exactly what we were talking about, that this is a great book for helping facilitate a discussion with somebody of this age who's maybe about to go through this. And like, it's great that you're updating the language to reflect what they can actually expect to experience. But I don't know about the updating the cover thing. I'm like, I think that's just how publishing marketing works.
Exactly. That's what I was feeling like. And another cover of another edition I think we've found featured on Goodreads is just featuring like a young girl on a with a blue
background of the clouds in the sky, and she's sort of looking up at the sky like she's talking to God. And I'm like, man, that doesn't really feel like what Margaret was doing when she was talking to God in the book.
Yeah, like both of these covers seem to me be a little bit like they do not really like reflect anything what's in the book. But to me, that looks like, okay, we have to update it. We have to make it appealing to younger audiences today or like in the last 10 years. And we all know that the covers change, like the trends in the covers change. But I feel like to me that was a little bit too, like, oh, we kind of make it pink, make it bright, young girl on the cover, make it more of a photo and less than a picture. And there we go. So like to me, those book covers do not look really appealing. And I'm wondering if a younger generation who today grew up with abundance of books around them, would they be like just based on the cover? Oh yeah, that looks like something that is aimed at me as a reader.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not that age anymore, but even when I was like a teenager, I actually really gravitated towards those super fancifully painted, like elaborate like covers that they had a lot in the 70s and 80s. Like when I was going to pick out books on the shelf, modern covers, I didn't find them very appealing. I wanted those like really lurid Fabio looking ones, even if I'm talking about not romance novels, but like a fantasy novel or something. I want some drama in there. I don't want a plain book with beach bubbles on it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know if this type of cover, this very plain, only text cover, is something that they think is more editorial for like pictures or something. I don't know why or how this became the trend. I know when I was young, when I read a book, I spent a lot of time examining the covers, looking at the art, thinking about the art. And so to me, the cover was very important just as much. And I think I would always look for the one edition that was maybe older. So it didn't have the same cover as all the new ones. If I could find one, it's like, that's the one I want, because it's something a little different. Even if I didn't like that cover as much as the newer cover.
Even now, if there's like a UK and a US version of a book and, one of the covers is better, I'll make sure to order that one, even if it's already more expensive to get it to me.
Hard to know. It's definitely very different than the cover I had, which I thought was a very sweet cover with a purple background. And of course, purple was my favorite color. So, I'm going to gravitate towards that, aren't I?
Of course. I think we're getting pretty deep in the weeds with our paratextual nerdery at this point. So let's bring it back around to, we haven't really discussed yet. Do we like the book? Do we think it's a good book? Do you have a favorite passage from the book?
I do like the book. Obviously, I have a history with it. I mean, I read it when I was 11 years old. At that time, I was already diagnosed with a chronic illness. And my mother was well aware that and the medication I was on would probably delay my development. And I don't remember precisely what kind of thoughts I had or feelings. I mean, I do know that I did want to be normal, but I also already knew I wasn't normal. So I think that kind of changes a perspective a little bit. But I did recognize thoughts and feelings and could relate to Margaret at the time. The funny thing for me today is I realize, I went from a time reading this when all my friends were talking about getting their periods to a time now when some of my the friends that are my age are talking about, hey, I just stopped my period. So it's kind of interesting then. I've read, end pieces of reading Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, in these two different stages of my life.
Oh yeah. I was just talking to a friend yesterday that she was updating me that she came out of hysterectomy surgery well and everything was fine, and we're just like, congratulations.
Yay!
You're free now.
Yeah. Yeah.
To an extent.
Right.
So I don't have this history with the book, of course. I had read at least one Judy Blume book that I remember when I was the right age, 11 or 12. I remember it being in the public library that was near my house at that age and reading it and getting this almost queasy feeling, actually, of just, wow, the real recognition of the self through other moment of oh, I don't know if I like this. I feel a little too I understand what's going on here. I don't, I mean, but I didn't read this one. And having just read it this week, I can say Judy Blume is a hell of a writer.
Yeah, I think so too.
I thought this book was so charming. The narrative voice of Margaret was so clear. What a remarkable little girl. I think the thing that stood out to me the most, that I really appreciated about the book the most, was that she was allowed to be angry. There's so many times in children's fiction where it's very aspirational. The kid is supposed to be heroic. The kid can't be participating in the bullying. They have to always, have a great, remarkable capacity for understanding and forgiveness and all these things. And I'm like, no, I think kids are allowed to be angry when adults in their life are jerking them around. That's real. That's how kids actually experience the world. It's not like they don't have emotions or thoughts because they're 11.
Right. For sure.
But they do have less, maybe, skill in managing these emotions, right? And grown-ups would.
Well, yeah.
But I thought a lot of her anger was just so justifiable, getting told you're moving away from your home and to a different place. You're never going to see your grandma again, all of these things. And then, the other grandparents show up and they're like, well, she's just going to have to go to church, and, making her Margaret's father visibly to Margaret feel like shit. And how dare you do that to my dad? How dare you show up in my life and interrupt it after all this time? You don't care about me. I'm like, that's so important for kids to get to see that reflected in the literature they read.
Right.
The emotions are real and ugly, and you have to deal with them,
And I think that scene with the other grandparents when they suddenly, after, 14 years, because they were the Christian parents of Margaret's mother, who did not approve of her marrying a Jewish boy. And I guess they stopped talking completely. And I think the great thing about this scene was, okay, Margaret was upset because she was supposed to go visit her other grandmother in Florida, and that was canceled because these grandparents were coming all of a sudden after all this time. And she was really mad and kind of sulky about it. But then she noticed, oh, wow, my dad is affected by this more than I am. And just making that connection of, showing kids that you can observe your parents and see how they're dealing with something that's, I thought that was very effective.
Parents are people.
Right. Yeah. And I thought that was a very effective thing in a book. To me, it feels like she's had some kind of understanding about educational prompts with kids. Because to me, some of the statements that just happen kind of offhand like that, oh, I realize my dad is more upset about this than I am. It seems like very educational and helping kids kind of form and understand what they're thinking.
Yeah, and they do that a little bit with the teacher at her class too, that they really actually sit there and spend time trying to think through how he's feeling about being a new teacher and how the classroom is affecting him. And I like that because I think it can take a lot of time for kids to really understand that the adults in their life are fallible people who also experience, emotions and aren't always the most capable in a given situation. Like, this is kind of around the age that you first start noticing that. So it just felt really realistic that way.
Yeah.
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 I don't know. I think it's good for kids to know that because it kind of helps them forgive the mistakes that they see, like their parents or their teachers merging towards them.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also the age when, and the time, more or less the time, obviously, when it's the time when kids are transitioning from being totally reliant on their parents, right? From that, like, from the young age being like, this is my whole world that keeps me grounded, that keeps me safe. And they realize maybe the limitations that their parents have, but also at the same time discovering what they themselves can do. That they themselves can decide a lot about how life goes, how things make them feel, how things affect them, and if it's necessary to maybe like push back, for example, right? So that's I guess this separation from a parent at the same age. Right?
And I wonder if that's actually a lot more the reason behind this book being censored so heavily. It's less about the menstruation and more about this reflection on childhood autonomy. Like, ooh, we don't really want our kids to know they can yell at their parents. I don't like that, Like, oh, I don't like that she's deciding when she's going to her friend's house and walking there by herself. Don't like that, Like, this control aspect, I think, has a lot to do with censorship. And it's less about, oh, I don't want my kid to know what sex is, and more about I don't want my kid making their own decisions about sex.
Right. Right. Well, one other thing I'd really like to discuss briefly is I think what surprised me about some of the reasons it got banned was the religious thing. Because to me, when I read it, I feel like, why don't these religious right, why don't they think it's good that this young woman is exploring and trying to become part of a religion? She goes to different churches. She's trying to understand exactly how she feels about God. She's trying to find God. And the fact that religion is one of the reasons it's banned really...
Well, they don't like the idea that multiple religions are valid. They're not okay with that.
Maybe it's...
And I think it's probably also the fact that when she's at her most upset with the situation with her grandparents, she starts screaming that God isn't real and she doesn't need him.
Okay. But
So,
then, don't we all go through that phase at some point?
But again, the control thing. They don't want children to be thinking that for themselves. They want it fed to them through the religious institution and religious leaders that they trust.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just have a very idealistic view about how people think about things. And then when I see something like this, and I think, oh, this book is great from all these different points of view, but these are the points of view that are criticized and make it banned. So,
Yeah, I mean, never underestimate just how freaking conservative conservatives are.
Yeah. And you kind of wonder, do they actually read the book or do they just know these things are in here?
This is something that we've talked about with our upcoming interview guest, and we went to this talk and found out the Moms for Liberty group and similar organizations, they don't read the books. They hand each other talking points through the organization to be like, here, this is everything you need to know to challenge this book in your school library. You don't have to have read it at all. And I'm like, that's insane. That's literally insane.
And I also feel like these moms need to get better hobbies.
Yeah. I'm like, that is someone who has a lot of free time on their hands.
I'm like, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you have that much free time and you want to do something for your community, go fucking solve homelessness or something.
Yeah, go work at the soup kitchen and feed people.
Plant trees. Yeah, I know. There are things to do.
Yeah, like climate change is a problem. Have you considered?
But now I was just thinking how I had a conversation with one of my students, and he mentioned a thing about AI, and we're back to our second favorite topic after book banning, AI. And I'm like,
AI is our first favorite topic, and book banning is coming in a close second, actually. But
let's figure out a way to put those together, and we'll be golden.
And we'll be clear, generative AI is the topic that we're constantly harping on. Other forms of AI are actually great in solving cancer, Anyway.
But yes, I was just thinking like how that student said, even if we acknowledge all the limitations of Gen AI that we have now, we will be pushed to use it further on in our work, maybe not so much in our private life, but at work definitely, because of the need and strive for efficiency. It's a different question if that actually makes us more efficient or not, right? That's kind of like a different thing. But right now the discourse is like, you have to be efficient, and that means you have to use Gen AI. That's why a lot of companies are kind of like switching to AI, whether they need it or not.
The only study that I know of on this topic says that AI actually makes you slower and less efficient,
and very quickly makes you also lose your skills.
Yeah.
I think that was that study about the diagnosing with colonoscopy, I think was also about cancer diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was way too quick that they could establish that, all right, the actual skills of the doctors are deteriorating if they rely on AI too much. But back to our point of book banning and AI, I can see myself like how our Mothers for Liberty or any other organization really, or an individual would be asking ChatGPT, like, what's in this book? Can you give me a summary? Can you give me talking points? Is there anything on that topic that I dislike? And they will always get a confirmation of that.
Right. I didn't even think about ChatGPT's ability to exacerbate this.
That's what I was just thinking, because I can see them being like, oh, we can be even more efficient now. Let's do this. Like, you don't have to read a book. You just ask ChatGPT for the summary. I have to admit, I once asked ChatGPT to summarize our episodes announcements to write a LinkedIn post, because I was like, I have to post it now. I don't have time. I give it our text that we wrote for like the ones that are published that you can see as descriptions of our episodes. I copy pasted the pure text in there. And what I got was completely off. Like, it's not the things we talked about. Like, literally, I think our first episode was about Frankfurt Book Fair of 2024. And ChatGPT did some like key points of us talking about bookbinding, talking about like libraries and like old books. Yeah, it was a pretty shitty that. And I was like, have I forgotten?
No. Oh, I mean, like, this is the same thing that happened to me a couple of months ago. I read a book and I wanted to look at one or two reviews of the book just to like, I do enjoy doing that because it helps me like clarify my own thoughts on a book if I read somebody else's opinion, right? And I started reading a review of a book and realized it had hallucinated a completely different fucking book. Like, it didn't even ask ChatGPT. This was somebody had done that and then posted it like as their own blog work or something. And it was like the character names were wrong. There were plot points that never happened in this book. And I'm like, you really posted that on your website? You clearly haven't read the book. What is wrong with you?
Well, I mean, I think that it is a very good point that you make about, ChatGPT will confirm the biases and more things will get banned if that is how it's used. I've also noticed a lot of people use Gen AI responses as proof of arguments now.
Yeah, without
online.
actually checking the sources.
And it's just like, what you posting this as your proof to me about something, and it's Grok or ChatGPT, and I'm like, this is not how you use this.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So I was just like, I was seeing like really um feel for the play of book banners here. And like, oh, because even if we consider, all right, there is a lot of malicious intent of this because people can say, okay, so I haven't read the book. Supposedly it might contain something I object. So I'm gonna put a book ban in. That's gonna take time to process. And while it's pending, the book is out. Like that is already causing some damage, maybe in sales. Maybe it's causing actually some raised interest. So who knows? But we can't guarantee that, right? So that is still something that prevents these books from being accessed by people who might need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the damage is done.
Right.
Well, the thing is, Judy Blume published this book in 1970. It's still in print, so clearly she's winning the war on children being able to read books. I am joining Judy Blume on her side of children should be able to read books about their own childhood experiences and screw the haters. So censorship doesn't really work.
It doesn't.
And I feel like the further we go into the digital era, like you can't really stop that to the same extent you could in 1970s, maybe 1950s. If we look back into the history of book banning, as our other interview guest, Andrea Elizondo, told us, like there's been cases like that of people smuggling books, people banning books over the years. And
since the invention of books, they have been smuggling censored books. It's part of the freaking communication surface as smugglers and pirates is
my favorite part. But today it really
use the internet.
Yep, exactly. Internet, digital files. Like we can see the distribution channels that are not even via the internet. Like it's a file you can share easily without any agents seeing that from the outside, so to say. So that makes censorship harder. But every single time when a book is flagged for something like that, that raises interest. Right. So maybe in a way there is another way to kind of push against.
Yeah, it's like free marketing, right?
Sort of being like
all attention is good attention.
Yeah. So we'll see how that develops, but we will be coming back to this topic every once in a while, I feel like.
Yeah,
we will. And again, we are discussing this book today to preface the next episode after this one, which will be an interview with Dr. Jennifer Gauck about the Banned Books Network Munster and the work they're doing here to discuss book banning and how that affects society and our bookishness.
Yeah. I mean, I think this book that we've been discussing today is a topic of one of the talks that the Banned Book Network is having. But with Jennifer, we're actually talking about a different book, which I think is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. So that should be interesting as well. Hope you'll join us again for that one.
Let's discuss more banned books.
Yes.
Read banned books.
Read banned books. All the banned books. They're the best books.
And this is a wrap.
Bye.
Bye-bye.